Welcome to a PreventConnect podcast, where we explore the prevention of violence against women. This is a project of the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault.
Hi everyone, this is Meghna Bhatt from PreventConnect at Calcasa. I'm so excited to talk to Priya Rai, the Queer Program Coordinator and Anti-Human Traffic Organizer at API Chaya. And today we will be discussing her and API Chaya's vision of transformative justice highlighted in your article in the International Examiner, with a particular focus on what it means and signifies for preventing violence from happening in our marginalized communities. So how are you doing, Priya?
Oh, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. So can you tell us a little bit about API Chaya and how it originated?
Sure. So API Chaya is a community-based organization in Seattle, Washington that works to build power in Asian, South Asian, Pacific Islander, and really broadly all immigrant communities. There were immigrant women who were seeing folks in their community being harmed, some even being killed because of domestic and sexual violence or because they were being trafficked. And they weren't finding anywhere that understood the risks that they face as immigrants, as people who don't speak English, who are undocumented. And so they realized they had to take steps to care for themselves and care for each other because they couldn't rely on outside systems. So there were two different groups. One was the API Women and Family Safety Center, which was largely Filipino women. And there's also another organization called Chaya, which was working in the South Asian community. And they both had really similar experiences working to build alternative systems. And so in 2011, those two organizations merged, and now we are API Chaya.
So your article in the International Examiner addresses the urgency in incorporating transformative justice practices for marginalized communities and adopting alternatives to like criminalization and to prevent further re-victimization. What do you envision when you suggest that for marginalized communities?
The anti-domestic violence or anti-violence movement has largely over decades invested in prisons and police as the frontline approach to dealing with harm. And I think at the end of the day, it's important to recognize that after decades of investing in that strategy, rates of violence have not gone down across the board for any community. And so what we need is alternatives to harm. I'm going to do a quote by Rebecca Farr, who is a member of Communities Against Rape and Abuse, which is a group that used to exist in the 90s. And she says, "I am not proposing that sexual violence and domestic violence will no longer exist. I am proposing that we create a world where so many people are walking around with the skills and knowledge to support one another that there is no longer the need for anonymous hotlines. I'm proposing that we break through the shame of survivors and the victim-blaming ideology shared by all of us so that survivors can gain support from the people already in their lives. I am proposing that we create a society where community members care enough to hold an abuser accountable so that a survivor does not have to flee their home. I'm proposing that all of the folks that have been disappointed by systems work together to create alternative systems. I am proposing that we organize." That really encapsulates what we are working towards when we talk about transformative justice or community accountability, really going back to what existed before all these new systems came into our lives. How can we do the work of breaking silences and really confronting this in a real way that maintains the humanity of everybody, the person who caused harm and the person who was experiencing harm? What would it mean to turn to a family member of yours, a friend, and tell them that you are concerned about their behavior? We were always the ones that we were waiting for. And so how can we build up our skills and knowledge to really support one another to change?
So how does API Chaya engage in transformative justice practices through the Natural Helpers Project?
Yeah, so the Natural Helpers Project is based on the principle that when someone is experiencing harm, the first people you really turn to are your friends, your family, your religious leader, maybe a doctor. You talk to people who are already in your life. And so how can we build up the power, skills, leadership, and knowledge of those people in our communities so they understand the dynamics of domestic and sexual violence? And also, we really do a lot of work on how can you support people who are also causing harm. So we're building skills and power throughout our community.
It's so important to include our community helpers with whom we interact with and talk to on a daily basis, as you mentioned. And all of us can play a role in terms of preventing or ending or responding to any form of violence that occurs. And I think, as you mentioned, there are key stakeholders that we often forget to bring in the way we respond and prevent sexual or domestic violence. How has been the community response to this project? Any hurdles that you had to overcome in terms of prevention or response?
I think in general, people are really, really responsive because we absolutely frame it, as I said before, and also like this is a way to build skills for yourself to make sure that you are ready, which I think immigrant communities are particularly well situated to understand that and want to invest in that way. But I think the trouble with transformative justice and community accountability overall is that it's often framed as an alternative to punitive justice, to the prison system. And then there's often confusion around how it works tangibly because it's more of a set of values and organizing goals than it is a one size fits all response. So, what we've done to try to address that is one, give people firm examples that transformative justice or community accountability response could look like educating people in the abuser and survivor's life about how to support a survivor. It can look like communities taking accountability for minimizing or normalizing domestic violence. It could look like approaching a person who caused harm about their behavior, safety planning that leverage community resources like childcare or respective community leaders. Those simple things that I think we don't value enough that can really mean the difference between somebody surviving or not in a situation. So I think trying to just really honor those, put those more centrally, and thinking through how can we expand those. So I'd say the main hurdle is just trying to make it tangible for people, but we're working on it, and otherwise folks are very, very receptive.
That's wonderful. All of us have these simple things that we usually trivialize in initiating these dialogues with the communities or with the families to change the culture. And I think all these play a role in how our social justice movements can keep building and staying sustainable and helpful for our communities. What are your thoughts on transformative justice as a way to change the culture in terms of preventing violence from happening in the first place?
There's just so much potential in transformative justice and community accountability. A real transformative community process underlines the self determination of the survivor and works to provide safety and support. It also works to address the community members' abusive behavior. And a truly transformative response to harm not only says, like, what does the survivor want and need, but it's how did we get here in the first place? What we're doing now as API Chaya and what particularly like Indigenous, Black, and immigrant communities have been doing for a really long time is being proactive about talking about what our values are, what we want our practices to be. And when you have communities coming together and give people tools, we can work our way towards a violence-free world. And it's easier to build these skills than it is to build trust.
Thank you so much, Priya, for your time today again, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as well.
Yeah, can you tell I love talking about this stuff?
Yes, I can see that.
I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you for listening to this PreventConnect podcast. PreventConnect is a project of the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault, with funding from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The views presented on PreventConnect are not necessarily the views of the United States government, the CDC, or CalCASA. To learn more about PreventConnect, visit www.preventconnect.org. For more information about CalCASA's mission, or to show your support, visit calcasa.org. That's CalCasa.org.